Supporting Mason through his breakup is more important than your broken wrist right now. My boyfriend said those words while I sat on the icy pavement outside our apartment, clutching an arm I could barely move. I hung up, blocked his number, and called the only person who had actually shown up for me that week. Looking back, the broken wrist wasn't what destroyed our relationship. It was simply the moment I stopped pretending it could still be saved. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 30, an accountant in Denver, and until recently, I'd spent 2 years with Adrian Cole. Adrian was 28, an event coordinator with the kind of charisma that made everyone feel special. He remembered birthdays, planned surprise celebrations, and could make a stranger believe their problems mattered. I used to think that was what made him extraordinary. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't receiving that version of him anymore. At first, his cancelled plans all sounded reasonable. Mason was in another crisis with his ex. His mother needed help getting to an appointment. Work suddenly demanded his attention. Every time I smiled, told him to go, and promised we could always celebrate another day. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "You're amazing, Claire." For a long time, I heard gratitude. Eventually, I realized he was thanking me for never making him choose. Mason's problems always came first, no matter how small. A slow text reply, another breakup, or a photo onto social media was enough for Adrian to drop everything and rush to his side, while I quietly learned that waiting had become my role in the relationship. Adrian answered Mason's calls no matter what we were doing. Dinner, movies, even lying in bed together. Everything stopped the moment Mason needed him. When I tried to talk about something that was bothering me, though, the answer was almost always the same. "Can we do this later? I'm exhausted." Later almost never came. The pattern spread into every part of our lives. If his mother casually mentioned shopping for a dining table, he'd clear his entire Saturday without hesitation. When I asked if we could spend a day together, he'd scroll through his calendar and say, "Let me see where I can fit you in," never realizing how much those words hurt. Yet when co-workers invited him out for drinks, he somehow always found the time. At my company party, he spent most of the evening staring at his phone before leaving early because Mason thought his ex might be dating someone else. For months, I explained it away. Adrian was busy. Adrian cared too much. Adrian knew I could handle myself. Those excuses died the weekend my sister Maya came down from Fort Collins. I cooked her favorite chicken marsala. Adrian opened a bottle of wine, and for the first 20 minutes, it felt like a normal evening. Then his phone rang. "It's Mason." I walked into the kitchen, and I could hear every word. "What happened?" "She did what?" Less than a minute later, he came back already reaching for his jacket. "Babe, I have to go. Mason's falling apart." "We're having dinner," I reminded him. I know, but his ex read his message and didn't reply. Maya lowered her wine glass. "You're leaving because someone read a text?" "They were together for 4 years, Adrian replied. "It's complicated." "You told us they broke up 8 months ago," I said. "That doesn't mean he's over it." He slipped on his shoes, kissed my cheek, promised he wouldn't be long, and walked out. I didn't come home until almost 2 in the morning. His untouched dinner was still sitting on the table when Maya finally broke the silence. "When was the last time he chose you over someone else?" "He chooses me." "When?" I opened my mouth, but no answer came. Maya's voice softened. "I'm not trying to hurt you. He knows I'm understanding. I'm just not as emotionally demanding as Mason." She looked at me for a long moment before quietly saying, "Claire, understanding and being invisible aren't the same thing." I carried Adrian's untouched plate into the kitchen, trying to ignore the lump in my throat. "He and Mason have been friends since college. And you've been together for 2 years, Maya replied. "The difference is that you've stopped asking him to choose." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Instead of arguing with my feelings, I started tracking the facts. As an accountant, numbers had always been easier to trust than emotions. The results were impossible to ignore. In just 3 months, Adrian had cancelled 14 plans with me, for work, his mother, Mason, co-workers, even a last-minute basketball game, and a sporting goods sale that apparently couldn't wait until morning. His phone told the same story. Mason received replies within seconds, his mother within the hour, co-workers' thoughtful messages. Mine usually arrived only after everyone else no longer needed him, sometimes hours later, sometimes the next day. The final proof came on our 2nd anniversary. I had reserved a restaurant 3 weeks ahead, taken the afternoon off, and bought Adrian a leather watch case engraved with the coordinates of the coffee shop where we first met. 2 hours before dinner, he called. "Claire, I'm so sorry." I already knew. "What happened?" "Mason got dumped. I thought he and Lauren were already over." "They started talking again. It's complicated." "It's our anniversary." "I know, but he's falling apart. He needs me. So do I." I was quiet for a moment before saying, "Please don't make me feel guilty for helping my best friend." I looked at the wrapped gift waiting on the kitchen counter. "What about dinner?" "We'll celebrate tomorrow. You understand, right?" That question had once made me feel loved because he trusted me. Now it only reminded me that he expected me to wait. I went to the restaurant alone. When the hostess asked if someone was joining me, I forced a smile and said he was running late, though I already knew he wasn't coming. 20 minutes passed before the waiter offered me a drink. After another 20, he quietly removed the second menu. I ordered dinner because going home felt even lonelier. Around me, couples celebrated anniversaries, toasted engagements, and laughed beneath the candlelight while my phone never rang. When the waitress finally asked whether she could clear the untouched place setting, I simply nodded. Yes, only then did the truth settle in. Adrian hadn't forgotten our anniversary. Forgetting would have been easier to forgive. He had remembered, compared it to Mason's latest crisis, and decided I could wait one more time. That dinner changed something in me. I stopped asking whether I was expecting too much and started looking at the facts instead. In 3 months, Adrian had cancelled 14 plans with me, abandoned our anniversary, and repeatedly treated our relationship as something that could always be moved to a more convenient day. The neglect had never been dramatic. It arrived in small, reasonable excuses until they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. So I started keeping notes, not to win an argument, but because I no longer trusted my own judgment after hearing I was too needy for so long. The list grew faster than I expected. He cancelled our weekend in Breckenridge because his mother suddenly wanted help choosing a dining table, even though she'd bought it online before they reached the store. A few days later, he walked out of a movie halfway through because Mason had argued with his roommate over dirty dishes. When I reminded him we'd paid for the tickets, he shrugged. You can stay and finish it, as if missing the movie had never been the point. Then came my company holiday party. I'd been excited to introduce Adrian to the people I'd worked with for years. I bought a new dress, confirmed the plans several times, and thought, just this once, he'd show up for me. Instead, he texted a few hours beforehand. Something came up at work. I might not make it. When I called, he insisted a vendor problem required the team to meet. At a bar, I asked. It's still work, Claire. His tone made me feel unreasonable for asking, so I went alone. Later that evening, I opened Instagram and found Adrian laughing on a rooftop with his co-workers while someone poured shots across the table. The caption read, "Survived another week with the best team." By the time he got home, he acted as though nothing had happened. How was the party? You told me you were working. I was. We talked business first. You skipped something that mattered to me so you could go drinking. You're making it sound worse than it was. No, I said quietly. It was exactly what it looked like. He dropped his keys onto the counter and answered with a sentence I never forgot. I knew you'd be fine alone. That was the moment I understood the real problem. Adrian didn't put everyone else first because I needed less from him. He did it because he believed I'd always forgive him. A week later, his company hosted its own holiday party, and I hoped things might finally be different. I'd spent nights helping him rehearse his presentation, fixing numbers, timing slides, and listening until I practically knew the speech by heart. Watching him work the room reminded me why I'd fallen for him in the first place. He greeted every co-worker by name, remembered details about their families, and made everyone feel important. Then he introduced me. This is Claire, my girlfriend. Nothing more, no mention of my career, our relationship, or the hours I'd spent helping him prepare. A few minutes later, Mason arrived. There he is! Adrian crossed the room, hugged him, and proudly introduced him to everyone nearby, praising his promotion and calling him brilliant, while I stood a few feet away still holding the wine he'd asked me to bring him. This is Mason, my best friend. He just got promoted to senior designer, and no one deserves it more. Adrian spent the next minute praising Mason while I stood nearby holding 2 glasses of wine, including the one he'd asked me to bring. He never came back for it. A little later, his boss, Melissa, stopped to congratulate him on the presentation. You seemed much more confident than at the first rehearsal. I smiled. We practiced every night for almost 2 weeks. Melissa looked surprised. Then I owe you some credit. Before I could answer, Adrian laughed. Claire's being generous. She mostly kept me company. She doesn't really understand the creative side. He said it lightly, but it stung. I'd spent hours timing his presentation, reorganizing slides, fixing budget numbers, and listening to the same speech until I could recite it myself. He knew exactly how much I'd done. Melissa's smile faded. Well, moral support still counts. Adrian immediately changed the subject. When we finally had a moment alone, I asked quietly, "Why did you pretend I hadn't helped you?" He glanced around the room. "Can we not do this here?" You made me sound irrelevant. I was being professional. By dismissing everything I did, his expression hardened. Claire, this is my work event. Please don't start drama. Before I could answer, Mason waved from across the room. I need to check on him, Adrian said. You were just with him. He's worried Lauren might show up. As far as I knew, Lauren hadn't even been invited, but Adrian still walked away without another word, leaving me standing alone beside the stage. For the rest of the evening, I watched him become the version of himself everyone else loved. He listened attentively, laughed at co-workers' stories, remembered every detail they shared, and even noticed when Mason needed another drink. Whenever I tried to speak, though, his attention drifted somewhere else. Near the end of the party, Melissa asked about our holiday plans. Before I could answer, Adrian smiled. Nothing special. Claire likes quiet weekends. I stared at him. We'd been talking about a trip to Santa Fe for weeks. Apparently, even our unfinished plans weren't worth remembering. We left early because Mason felt anxious about possibly seeing Lauren. She never showed up. During the drive home, Adrian spent most of the trip checking whether Mason was okay. Only after dropping him off did I finally speak. You embarrassed me tonight. I did not. You told your boss I barely helped you. It wasn't the place to explain our routine. You could have simply thanked me. I thank you all the time. When? He sighed. You're being too sensitive. I let out a bitter laugh. Every time I tell you something hurts, you decide the problem is me. That's not true. You ignored me all night. It was a work event. I had responsibilities. You still found time for Mason. I needed me. So did I. I kept his eyes on the road. You're my girlfriend, Claire. I didn't think you needed me to babysit you. I wasn't asking to be babysat. Then what did you want? I watched the city lights slide across the window before answering. I wanted you to be happy I was there. Silence filled the car. Finally, he said, I don't have to perform for you. I turned toward him. What does that mean? It means you already know I love you. I have to impress people at work. With you, I can relax. I held his gaze. So everyone else gets your best effort because you need their approval, and I get whatever's left because you know I won't leave. That's not what I said. No, I replied quietly. I think it's exactly what you meant. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. I thought you were different, secure, independent, not someone who needed constant attention. I don't need constant attention. I need effort from the person I'm trying to build a life with. We live together. We share an apartment, I corrected. That's not the same as choosing each other. He shook his head. You're jealous of my friends. I'm asking one simple question. When was the last time you chose our relationship over someone else? We're stable. The answer came so quickly I almost laughed. Stable? You don't even think about us. That's not true. Then answer the question. He opened his mouth but couldn't. The silence lasted until we reached our apartment. After parking, he finally muttered, You're keeping score. I started keeping score because every time I brought this up, you told me it wasn't happening. His expression changed. You actually wrote it down? Yes. That's unhealthy. No, what's unhealthy is needing evidence before believing my own boyfriend treats me like an afterthought. I looked away. I'm not having this conversation while you're emotional. I'm the calmest I've been in months. Without another word, he slammed the car door and walked inside. Nothing changed upstairs. Adrian climbed into bed, scrolled through his phone, and dismissed my final question without looking up. Do you think living together means you don't have to make an effort anymore? I think you're inventing problems. Before I could answer, his phone lit up. The Mason. He picked up immediately. Hey, you okay? His voice softened in an instant, warmer than it had been during our entire drive home. I quietly closed myself in the bathroom. For months, I'd convinced myself I was asking for too much. That night, I realized I'd simply been asking the wrong person. 3 days later, freezing rain covered Denver in ice. After work, I stepped carefully across our apartment parking lot, groceries in one hand and my laptop over my shoulder. My foot suddenly slipped, my body twisted, and I landed hard on my outstretched arm. A sharp crack shot through my wrist. The pain stole my breath. I tried to stand, but collapsed again as another wave of pain tore through my arm. My wrist was already swelling. With shaking fingers, I called Adrian. He answered on the third ring. Hey, babe. Music played in the background. I could hear Mason laughing. I slipped, I whispered. I think I broke my wrist. There was a pause. Oh, wow. I can't drive. He sighed. I really picked the worst time to answer. What does that mean? I'm at Mason's apartment. Of course he was. He just got back from therapy. So? We're talking. I stared across the empty, frozen parking lot. I'm sitting on the ground, Adrian. I need you to take me to urgent care. He hesitated. Mason's having a breakthrough. I thought I'd misheard him. What? He's finally opening up about why he keeps sabotaging his relationships. My wrist might be broken. I know it hurts. It doesn't just hurt. I can't even move it. His voice dropped. I can't leave right now. The words barely seemed real. You can't leave? Mason finally trusts someone enough to talk about his childhood. I need medical attention. I know, but emotional crises matter too. I looked around the empty parking lot, trying to understand how we were even having this conversation. I'm your girlfriend. I know. I've been lying on frozen pavement for 5 minutes. You could call an Uber. I can't even open the passenger door with one hand. After another pause, he sighed. Claire, You're probably overreacting. It's likely just a sprain. I heard it crack. You always panic when you get hurt. I've never called you begging for help before. I know. But Mason really needs me. That hurt more than the fall. Not because he chose Mason, but because he spoke as if the choice should have been obvious. I took a slow breath. If I were sitting with Maya while you were injured, would you expect me to come? Instead of answering, he said, I don't want to argue in front of Mason. I almost laughed. I was worried about making his friend uncomfortable while I was sitting alone in freezing rain, barely able to move. So that's your answer. You're not listening. No, I said quietly. I finally am. His patience disappeared. Take some ibuprofen, ice it, and if it still hurts tomorrow, get it checked. Tomorrow. I wanted me to wait until tomorrow. I asked one last question. If this were your mother, would you tell her to wait? A long silence followed before he finally answered. That's different. Of course it was. Everyone else was different. I ended the call. I didn't cry. Instead, I called Maya. She answered before the second ring. Claire. I fell. I'm coming. No questions. No hesitation. I'm 25 minutes away. Don't move. The call lasted less than a minute. She arrived even sooner than she promised, rushed across the ice, took one look at my wrist and said, We're going to urgent care. She never complained about leaving work or asked whether it could wait. She simply got me there. X-rays confirmed what I'd already suspected. You fractured your distal radius, the doctor said. You'll need a cast for 6 weeks, followed by physical therapy. As the technician wrapped my arm, my phone buzzed. Brienne. I ignored the call. Moments later, his text appeared. How'd it go? Then another. Mason and I talked until almost 2 this morning. Honestly, it was one of the deepest conversations we've ever had. I read both messages twice. Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he apologize. Everything was still about Mason. I locked the screen. Maya noticed. Was that Adrian? I handed her the phone without speaking. She read the messages, exhaled slowly, and gave it back. I'm trying very hard not to say something I'll regret. I already know what you think. She shook her head. No, you don't. What? She met my eyes. I don't think Adrian loves you the way you deserve. Maya's words hurt because I'd already begun thinking the same thing. The next morning made me realize how helpless a broken wrist could be. Getting dressed, making coffee, typing, even opening a door suddenly became frustrating with only one good hand. At lunch, I struggled into a nearby coffee shop, juggling my bag, paperwork, and a tray until someone caught it before everything hit the floor. I've got it. I looked up to find a man about my age wearing a hospital ID badge. Looks like you've had a rough week. You have no idea. He carried the tray to a table and introduced himself. I'm Daniel. Claire. When he noticed my cast, he nodded. Fresh fracture. Yesterday. I'm a nurse practitioner, he said, pointing toward the clinic across the street. Looks like we're neighbors. We spent most of lunch talking about work, Denver winters, and overpriced coffee until he asked how I'd broken my wrist. I told him about the fall, then casually mentioned calling Adrian. His expression changed. Did he take you to urgent care? No, he couldn't leave. Couldn't? I was helping his best friend after therapy. Daniel sat quietly for a moment. So you thought your wrist was broken, called your boyfriend for help, and he stayed because someone wanted to talk. I nodded. Claire, he said gently, that's not normal. I instinctively defended Adrian. Mason was having a hard night. So were you, Daniel replied. A conversation can wait, medical care can't. Hearing the story through someone else's eyes stripped away every excuse I'd made for Adrian. It didn't sound complicated. It sounded wrong. Daniel didn't tell me to leave him or criticize him further. He simply looked at my cast and said, You deserve to have someone come. Those words stayed with me long after lunch. For months, I'd been made to feel guilty for wanting the bare minimum. Daniel reminded me that expecting your partner to show up in an emergency wasn't unreasonable. What surprised me even more was what he didn't do. He never flirted or tried to take advantage of the situation. He was simply kind. The next day, he texted, Daniel, how's the wrist? Still hurting? It was such a simple question. Yet Adrian had never asked it. When I admitted everything still hurt, Daniel replied almost immediately. Daniel, don't push it. Let yourself heal. No lectures. No hidden motives. Just concern. Living with a cast quickly exposed how little Adrian noticed. Buttoning clothes, opening jars, washing my hair, or lifting cookware became daily struggles. Yet he rarely looked up from his phone. 3 nights after the accident, I nearly dropped a pot of boiling water. Adrian walked into the kitchen just in time to see it. You okay? I've got it. Good. Then he walked away. I wasn't upset because he hadn't taken over. I was upset because he never asked if I needed help. On Thursday evening, he finally brought up my injury. How's your wrist? It wasn't a sprain. It was broken. I know. You know, I heard. Maya took me to urgent care. I rubbed the back of his neck. I honestly thought you were overreacting. I stared at him. You thought I exaggerated a broken bone. I didn't mean it like that. Then why didn't you come? He sighed. Mason was in a bad place. I was sitting on frozen pavement, unable to move my wrist. I needed emotional support. I needed medical care. Mental health matters too. I'm not arguing with that. I'm asking why you couldn't pause one conversation to help your girlfriend. His answer came without hesitation. You could have called someone else. Everything suddenly made sense. So you really believe anyone could replace you? I didn't say that. You just did. But Mason specifically needed me. I nodded slowly. So I'm the one who's replaceable. No. Then explain the difference. I hesitated before answering. You already know I'll be there. I almost laughed. Except he hadn't been. Not on our anniversary. Not when Maya visited. Not at my company party. And certainly not in that parking lot. Quietly I said, so you save your effort for the people who might leave. His face fell. Claire? No, I interrupted. I finally understand. That night I lay awake replaying his words. You already know I'll be there. The truth was, I hadn't been able to rely on him for months. The next afternoon, Daniel invited me for coffee after work. Normally I would have declined, but Adrian had already told me he'd be helping Mason organize his apartment that evening. He didn't ask whether I wanted to come. He simply informed me he wouldn't be home. So I said yes. Over coffee, Daniel and I talked for nearly 2 hours about books, travel, family, and terrible cooking disasters. When I mentioned Maya, he frowned for a second. Wait, your sister was the one who drove down that night, right? She was. He nodded. As we left, Daniel glanced at my cast. Need help carrying anything? I've got it. You sure? I smiled. I'm getting better. He simply wished me a good night and walked away. Driving home, I realized the easiest conversation I'd had all week wasn't with the man I'd loved for 2 years. It was with someone I'd met only days earlier. The next Saturday morning, Adrian wandered into the kitchen with a cup of coffee. Oh, I almost forgot. My mom needs help moving furniture this afternoon. You'll come, right? I stared at him. My wrist is broken. You don't have to lift anything. Just come. I couldn't help laughing. You left me on frozen pavement because you thought I was overreacting. And now you want moral support. I already said I felt bad. No, you asked how my wrist was. That's not an apology. He frowned. Why are you turning one mistake into such a big deal? Because it wasn't one mistake. It was every cancelled date, every broken promise, every conversation that ended with me apologizing for expecting basic consideration. The parking lot hadn't created our problems. It had simply exposed them. The following day, Maya stopped by with groceries. One look at me and she asked, "You're not sleeping, are you?" I tried to brush it off, but after hearing Adrian had insisted anyone could have taken me to urgent care, she slowly shook her head. He actually said that. I nodded. The worst part isn't what he did, she said quietly. It's that he honestly believes he was right. She was right. Adrian hadn't acted out of panic or poor judgment. He genuinely believed I'd still be there no matter how often he put me last. A week after my accident, Mason cancelled another guy's night because he'd gotten a last-minute date. Minutes later, Adrian called. Looks like it's just us tonight. We can order pizza and watch Netflix. It sounded as if nothing had happened, as if I'd automatically become his Friday plan the moment someone else became unavailable. For the first time in 2 years, I said no. I'm busy tonight. Busy? He asked. With who? I glanced at Daniel's message confirming dinner. I'm meeting Daniel. The line went silent. Finally, Adrian asked, Who's Daniel? A man I met at the coffee shop. The day after you broke your wrist. Yes. So you've been seeing another guy? I've had coffee with him. You never told me. You never asked. His voice sharpened. So you're choosing another man over your boyfriend? I almost laughed at the irony. If Mason hadn't cancelled, you wouldn't have called me. I didn't answer. You didn't make plans with me. You settled for me after your first choice disappeared. That's ridiculous. Is it? I wanted to spend time with you. After everyone else was unavailable. His frustration grew. Are you attracted to this guy? I looked out the office window before answering. I'm attracted to people who make me feel heard. Silence. Then he accused me of emotionally cheating. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I called you thinking I'd broken my wrist, I said. You left me alone and now you're upset because someone else treated me with basic kindness. I made one mistake. It was never just one. That evening, I met Daniel at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. There was nothing dramatic about it. No grand romance, no instant sparks. It was simply peaceful. Daniel waved when I walked into the restaurant. Sorry, parking downtown was a nightmare. I laughed. You still beat me here. Barely. He smiled. How's the wrist? Not because the injury defined me. Because he remembered. Throughout dinner, he asked about work, Maya, and even the accounting software upgrade I'd complained about days earlier. Every detail mattered to him, and halfway through the meal, when he noticed me struggling to cut my food with one hand, he quietly reached for the plate without making me feel embarrassed. Without saying a word, Daniel took my plate, cut the chicken into smaller pieces, then quietly switched it back. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said with a smile. "It just seemed easier." The gesture lasted only a few seconds, yet it carried more thoughtfulness than countless promises Adrian had made over 2 years. For the first time in months, I wasn't competing with anyone for someone's attention. Daniel's phone buzzed once during dinner. He glanced at the screen, silenced it, and turned it face down. "Sorry," he said. "It can wait." Then he looked back at me and asked me to finish what I was saying. When I finished speaking, he listened and asked another question. It felt so unfamiliar that it broke my heart. Basic attention shouldn't feel extraordinary in a relationship. When I got home, Adrian was waiting beside the kitchen island. "What time did dinner end?" "Around 9. You were gone almost 3 hours. We were talking. With another man. I had dinner with a friend." His expression hardened. "I don't like this." I couldn't help smiling. "That's ironic." "What does that mean?" "I've spent 2 years watching you drop everything for Mason." "That's different." "Why?" "He's my best friend, and Daniel is becoming mine." His jaw tightened. "You've known him less than 2 weeks. He showed up emotionally in 2 conversations. I've been with you for 2 years. I know. Doesn't that matter?" "It used to." His eyes followed mine to the cast on my wrist. "What changed?" "You weren't there. I told you I felt terrible. You never actually apologized. You told me about Mason's breakthrough. I checked on you. You sent a text. I cared." I looked at him quietly. "I didn't need a text. I needed my boyfriend." The apartment fell silent. Finally, he looked away. "You don't understand what Mason was going through. I understand exactly what I was going through." We stopped arguing about the parking lot. We started arguing about the last 2 years. I reminded him of every cancelled date, every broken promise, every family dinner interrupted because Mason called first. Adrian insisted I was keeping score. "I'm paying attention," I said. "That's different. Relationships aren't spreadsheets. I'm an accountant. I notice patterns." He sighed in frustration. "You used to be independent." "I still am." "Then why do you suddenly need so much attention?" "I don't need attention. I need a partner." "I am your partner." "No," I said quietly. "You give me whatever's left after everyone else." He pointed toward the door. "You've changed since Daniel showed up." I shook my head. "No, I changed the night I was sitting on frozen pavement, waiting for someone who never came." His expression faltered. "You've turned him into some perfect guy." "I barely know him." "Then why compare us?" "Because he listens." "I listen." "No," I replied. "You just wait for me to stop talking." For the first time that night, Adrian had no answer. "I thought you were different." "Different how?" "I thought you'd understand how important my friendships are." "I do," I said. "I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to stop choosing someone else before you even think about me." He stared at me. "I never wanted to come first," I continued. "I just wanted to stop coming last." For a moment, I thought he'd finally understood. Then his face hardened. "Fine. If Daniel is so amazing, go be with him." I looked at him in disbelief. "You really think that's the problem? I don't even recognize you anymore." The regret hit him immediately. "I didn't mean..." "No," I interrupted. "You meant it." Hein tried to correct himself, but I kept going. "Daniel listened, that's all." Somehow that had become something I'd stopped expecting from you. Hein took a step toward me. "Claire." I stepped back. "No, you've answered every question I've been asking for 2 years." His expression shifted from anger to fear. "What are you saying?" I looked around the apartment we'd shared. I think this relationship ended long before either of us admitted it. The next morning, Maya arrived before 10. Without wasting time, we packed my clothes, books, and the photos that still meant something to me. Adrian watched from the hallway, cycling between anger, excuses, and tears. "You can't throw away 2 years over one argument." I folded another sweater into a box. "This isn't one argument. You've been looking for an excuse to leave. I've been waiting for a reason to stay." He fell silent. For 2 years, I'd always been the one who stayed. My new apartment was smaller, half empty, and echoed with every step. But after Maya carried in the last box, I realized something had changed. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I looked around the quiet room. "I honestly don't know." She smiled. "That might be the healthiest answer you've given in months." Living alone hurt, but every evening was finally quiet. There were no cancelled dates, no last-minute calls from Mason, no evenings spent wondering whether I mattered. For the first time in years, I already knew how my nights would end, and that certainty felt strangely comforting. Adrian called 3 times that first weekend and left 2 voicemails. One was angry, the other sounded defeated. I deleted both. On Monday, he texted, "Jan, we meet. We need to fix this." I stared at the message before locking my phone. For 2 years, I'd begged him to fix our relationship. Only after I stopped asking did he decide it was worth saving. As the weeks passed, work became easier. My wrist still hurt, but my mind finally had room for something besides disappointment. Co-workers noticed before I did. "You seem happier. You're smiling again." Without constantly managing Adrian's unpredictability, life felt lighter. Daniel checked in every few days, never demanding my attention or expecting anything in return. Sometimes he asked about physical therapy. Sometimes he sent a funny story from work. Sometimes he said nothing at all. When I struggled to open the bottle, Daniel reached toward it before stopping himself. "Sorry," he said with a small laugh. "Nurse habit." "May I?" Only after I handed it over did he loosen the cap and give it back. It was a tiny gesture, but every kindness from him came with respect instead of assumption. Halfway through the walk, he asked, "Do you miss Adrian?" I thought about it before answering. "I miss who I hoped he'd become. I don't miss competing." Daniel smiled. "Those aren't the same thing." A few weeks later, Maya invited us to Sunday dinner with my parents. I worried they would think everything was happening too fast. Daniel only smiled. "Then we'll have dinner anyway." The evening turned out to be effortless. My dad spent half the meal talking baseball with him. My mom insisted everyone take leftovers home, and as dessert was being served, Maya quietly pulled me aside. "I haven't seen you laugh like that in a long time." I hadn't realized it until she said it. None of my smiles felt forced anymore. About a month after I moved out, Adrian finally stopped calling. Instead, Maya phoned with unexpected news. Mason talked to him. "What happened?" "He told Adrian he'd neglected his relationship with you." I couldn't help smiling at the irony. The friend Adrian had always chosen first was now telling him he'd destroyed his relationship by doing exactly that. It was far too late. A few weeks later, another message appeared. "I've been thinking a lot. I took you for granted. I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. Could we meet once? I'd like the chance to apologize properly." I read Adrian's message twice before handing my phone to Daniel. He didn't tell me what to do. Instead, he asked, "How does it make you feel?" I thought for a moment. "Sad. Because you miss him?" I shook my head. "Because it took losing me for him to finally listen." Daniel nodded. "Sometimes people don't recognize steady love until it's gone." Looking at Adrian's message, I realized how long I'd confused patience with hope. Patience waits. Hope believes change is coming. Adrian hadn't wanted to change until losing me became the consequence. That evening, I finally replied, "Claire, I'm glad you've taken time to reflect on our relationship, and I hope you keep doing that, but I'm not willing to relive a chapter we've already finished. I'm building a relationship with someone who chooses me every day, and that's where I want to invest my future. I wish you nothing but the best." I pressed send. Was never answered. A few months later, Daniel and I returned to the same Italian restaurant where we'd had our first dinner. The waiter recognized us immediately. "Back again?" Daniel smiled. It became our place. As we settled by the window, I caught myself watching couples arrive together. Months earlier, I would have been wondering whether Adrian would cancel, whether Mason would call, or whether another emergency would take priority over me. Those thoughts never came. Daniel reached across the table and quietly took my hand. "What's on your mind?" I smiled. "The last time I was here, I kept staring at an empty chair. And tonight," I squeezed his hand. "Tonight no one's missing." Looking back, I know our relationship didn't end because of a broken wrist, Mason, or even Daniel. It ended because love can't survive on leftovers. For 2 years, Adrian assumed I'd always wait until everyone else had his time, attention, and energy. The day I stopped waiting wasn't the day I gave up on him. It was the day I finally chose myself. And once I learned what it felt like to be someone's first choice instead of their backup plan, I knew I would never settle for anything less again.